Hi everybody and welcome back to the fourth part of the Botario chatbot tutorial. Now in the last parts we have already built a bot that can respond to hi and bye and thank you, and it can also tell you the current time, and it can answer some basic questions about Botario features. Now in the last part of the tutorial we have created a generic intent called what is. And then you can see here we have many very similar samples, like what is the purpose of the spell checker, what is the purpose of the content improver, how does the spell checker work, and then how does the content improver work. So we actually want to add more features like spell checker, content improver, so more entities. And for each of these entities, we'll have to write samples the same as this, like what is the purpose of the annotation tool, or whatever, what is the purpose of the content generator. And in order to do that, we can actually use the content generator to make that first content production a little bit easier. Always remember, you can only build a great chatbot with real user interactions, so everything we are doing right now is setting up the prototype. So let's see what we can do with the content generator. The content generator allows us to set up dictionaries that we can then combine to content samples that are going to be rolled out automatically in each variation that is possible according to what's in the dictionary. So let's go to content generator dictionary and add a new dictionary for our entity content improver. So we are going to name this content improver. And now here we can select multiple things. So first of all, we can select if this should be an entity. So we can select the corresponding entity. And we can also select whether or not the list of words that we now are going to write down here. So like content improver. And it could also be content improve was wrong. Content improver. Jesus. So, but it could also, people could also write like content improvements, or spell it together, content improver. So if you select synonym yes, then all of these different values are going to be mapped to this value here. So whenever an entity is found of the type content improver and the value of the entity would be content improvements, then if you select yes here, then all of these different values are going to be mapped to one single value, namely here, which is the name of the dictionary. And that can be very handy in certain cases. We don't really need it right here, but I'm going to leave it as that, just like that. And then you can also select here whether or not this list of words should also serve as an entity lookup. So this will add a lookup table to your training data. And this does not mean that each time content improver is found somewhere, this will automatically be recognized as this entity, but it helps with the entity recognition. So this is usually a good idea if you have like many different ways how an entity could be spelled, or like name entities that you want to recognize, and you have a complete list of all the names that you want to recognize. Then you don't need to create a training sample for each name, but you can just train it with a couple of names, and then basically put all the other names in the lookup table, just like here. Okay, content improver, content improvements, content improver spelled in one word, and maybe say content improving. Okay, let's leave it like that. Save it. We have our first dictionary. Let's add a second one. That's going to be spell checker. And again, this is an entity, and we want all the values to be mapped to this value here. And we also want to use the lookup. Spell checker, spell checking, or maybe something completely different, auto correction. Yeah, let's leave it like that. So now we have four different entries in each dictionary. Oh, I forgot to set it as a lookup table here. It's quite handy. You can see here what you have configured, if it's an entity and synonym or a lookup table. And then we are going to add a new generic dictionary, which is not an entity, but just different ways of asking what is, for example. And then the samples would be what is the, or how do I use the, what is the purpose of the. So I'm trying to now here write different samples in a dictionary of how to start a sentence that users could ask if they ask about the content improver. What is the content improver? How do I use the content improver? What is the purpose of the content improver? And yeah, maybe leave it like that here, save the changes. And now I will just quickly, before I continue here and build this a little bit further, I can just show you what it actually does. So now we can go over to the content section of the generator, click on the intent that we want to generate samples for, which is what is, click on what is here. And then I can add entries here. And if I start to type, it will suggest me dictionaries. Dictionaries are always marked with an @ sign at the start. So what is, and then I could say the spell checker, that's one. And then we could do the same for what is, and then the content improver. Now, if I click on preview, as you can see, we have just created 24 samples with yeah, each variation, each possibility of rolling these two different dictionaries out with each other. So what is in content improver and what is in spell checker. What I can also do here, I don't need to rely completely on dictionaries. I can say stuff like how does the, and then for example spell checker, and then work. We can do the same for how does the, and then content improver work. And now if we roll these out, then we already have 32 samples, which is pretty cool. And now you can imagine how easy it is to add new features like the content generator itself, or the annotator, or you know, all different features. I can just put them in these dictionaries and then create generic content. Be careful, however, it is very easy to create thousands of generic synthetic samples with the content generator. And if your real samples are just like a handful, like we have already now, we now have like 10 samples for each intent, and then you have 1 or 2 intents for which you created synthetic content with the content generator, and then you have hundreds or even thousands of samples for this intent. This will really impact the performance of your NLU model, because the model will heavily overfit on these synthetic samples, and yeah, you will run into trouble. But it's sometimes, in certain cases, it's a very nice feature to just get you started and have some content to start with before you start to collect real samples from your users. All right, so now let's see if this really works, and also if the synonym mapping really works. So let's go over to the tools section, stop our chat service, and then start a new training. So we have just changed the NLU data, so just the NLU model will be retrained, and this is not going to take very long. But as always, after the training, we are also going to run a full evaluation of the current model, also for core, because we might have changed some entities and the way how they behave. So this is all going to be run now. And then once this is done, we will start our chat service and see also here in the terminal if the synonym mapping works. And then we have it for this episode of the tutorial. Okay, so now I can restart my chat service. I can already start to type here. Remember, once you have these lines here, get, post, get, then you're ready to go. So what is the content improver? So I get the correct answer, and let's see what Rasa did with it. So we received a user message. What is the content improver? The name is of the intent is what is, and then we have the entities. The value of the entity was mapped to content improver, and the entity is content improver, and you can see here that it was this entity was processed by the entity synonym mapper. So the actual value that it was here, content improver in one word, was mapped to content underscore improver. Maybe to make that more clear again, how does the auto correction work? So now it answers with the spell checker, which is correct. And let's see. So here is auto correction, but the entity is recognized as entity spell checker with the value spell checker because it was processed by the entity synonym mapper, right? All right, so this works as expected, and we now had an easy way to generate lots of examples just by combining different dictionaries together. So that's an easy way to generate synthetic content, even with entities and a synonym and lookup tables. And we could also take a look at the generated Rasa training files. Let's go over to data management here and Rasa im export and just export the Rasa files. Double click here, and then let's look at the NLU training data. Sorry, not with export, but please with Visual Studio Code. And then if you scroll down, so first of all, here are all the generated examples, and you can see the entities are annotated correctly, automatically. And then at the end of the training content, we have the synonyms for content improver and for spell checker, and we also have the lookup table for content improver and spell checker. So that's just like in the Rasa original stack. All right, I hope you enjoyed this short tutorial on how to use the content generator. Like I said, be careful. It's a very powerful tool. It's very easy to generate like tens of thousands of samples with it. So let's be reasonable here and use it to support your building of a bot. Yeah, but make sure you don't overfit on these synthetic examples. All right, see you next time. Bye-bye.